All right, and I'm going to. Okay, so why don't we get started? All of our presenters are here. So thank you for spending your morning with us. Unless you're one of our speakers today, just kindly mute yourself to eliminate some background noise. And after today's panel discussion, we're going to have a moderated question and answer session. And I'm going to allow Helene to talk to you about that real quick. Are you, hang on a second, let me unmute everybody.
Okay.
Go ahead, Helene.
How my phone was muted, but how do we unmute ourselves when it's time to talk? How do we do that?
I think
Do
if
we
you go
know?
over,
is it like stars?
If you go over to the attendee part of the chat bar or whatever,
right?
I think you can find your name and then mute yourself.
Unmute myself. Okay, that's a good point because my phone was muted and I'm muted. And
okay.
Anyway, yes, I will be, as we go through the presentations today, this is Helene Roberts from Federal Highway. I will be monitoring the chat pod. So please enter your questions for the presenters into the chat pod as we go along with the presentations, and I will be monitoring the questions and actually keeping track of them. And then at the end of the presentations, we're going to go through all the presentations, and at the end of the presentations, we will have the panelists address your questions. So don't worry, I will be monitoring the chat pod and we will be addressing the questions at the end. That's it for me, Amanda.
Okay, so with that out of the way, I'm going to pass it along to Mike Russo, our Assistant Commissioner. So go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thanks a lot, Amanda. Thanks, Helene. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first virtual New Jersey State Transportation Innovation Council meeting. First and foremost, I hope this finds everyone healthy and safe during these very unusual, very challenging times. You know, back in 2018, when FHWA launched Everyday Counts 5, little did we know how relevant one of their EDC 5 innovations would become. Virtual public involvement at the time was innocently introduced as a technique offering convenient and low-cost methods for engaging the public and accelerating project delivery. As we know now, as a result of COVID-19, virtual public meetings have now become rare. So we're going to abandon our standard STIC Council meeting agenda today and focus this meeting entirely on the topic of virtual public meetings. Today's session, as Helene had said, will be a panel discussion, and we will have an opportunity to hear from a variety of presenters on their experiences in conducting business in a virtual environment. Before I go any further, I would like to thank those responsible for making today's session possible, including NJDOT's Amanda Gendek, Helene Roberts over at Federal Highway, and each of today's presenters who we will be meeting in a few minutes. I would also like to acknowledge Barry Seymour, Mary Amin, Jennifer Marandino, the executive directors of our state's 3 MPOs for joining us. As always, I would like to thank Robert Clark, Valeria Ramazova, and everyone from FHWA for their continued support of the New Jersey STIC. And with that, I would like to thank our first speaker for taking time out of her busy schedule to join us today to provide her perspective on today's topic. So with that, I'm honored to introduce our Commissioner, Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm really happy to be able to join you this morning for this STIC meeting. It's funny to be so still after a schedule that has usually been so mobile. And so we're all making, obviously, adjustments in the way we do business. And this particular adjustment, I would suggest, is probably the single biggest, which is to be doing things almost everything virtually. And it's a good change. It's not a bad change. But before we talk about that, I want to take a moment to thank all of our public employees for all the hard work they do. This is National Public Employee Recognition Week. And while we can't be together because of all of the things that are going on in the world, it is no less important for us to remind everyone just how grateful we are for all of your service, and it's all levels of government. It's everyone in government. Everybody has a role to play in making government successful. So I'm very grateful to all of you, and to the whole New Jersey DOT family for what they do every day. Very important to me. But your topic is a timely one, and public meetings in the virtual environment. And Mike had said, could you talk a little bit about the public hearings that you had for New Jersey Turnpike Authority and South Jersey Transportation Authority leading up to a new capital program and toll adjustment? So they were interesting. And I think what I've learned from them is a couple things. We have virtual meetings like we're having today. We have public meetings like New Jersey Transit or New Jersey Turnpike or DRPA or NJTPA or DVRPC or SJTPO, public meetings of boards where we take actions, and we have public comment periods, and then we have public hearings. And each of those three different tranches have different challenges. So a meeting like this is pretty easy in comparison. We all are going to have our opportunity to talk. We have the ability to go into GoToMeeting. We see who's there. People are relatively familiar with technology. They've used it in other parts of their work. Public meeting is probably slightly more challenging for that small period of time where you have public comment in teaching, virtually teaching the public how to communicate with you when they can't see you in person, right? They're used to driving somewhere, standing in front of you, seeing your face, and communicating with you. And so many people you will find as you go forward in the public meeting environment and in the public hearing environment do not decide that what they're saying is actually public comment. And it's really hard as a board member to not respond to that. So what we found at the Turnpike board meeting last week was, teaching people how to wait in a queue, how to wait for them to be called to speak, not to speak over each other, to try to get in line next was a little challenging. And so we have to continue to look at technology. The public hearing process for the Turnpike and Parkway was challenging on two fronts. The topic itself is tough. To talk about a toll adjustment and to go forward in the midst of all of what we're going through, seems obviously a little counterintuitive, but at the end of the day, it was part of a process, and that it just led up to the public hearings at that moment in time. All of the public hearings were held in accordance with the executive orders the governor had in place at the time. And even at the Turnpike, at that point, it was a rule of less than 50 people in the room, which we maintained at all times, and had overflow space. And we had additional television monitors so that people could view the hearing, waiting for their turn to come in the room and speak. So it took a little bit more thinking, but it was important for us to be able to continue with the meetings. As you must all know, a lot of the environmentalists have come out very strongly against the toll adjustment, and actually not so much the toll adjustment as what's in the capital plan, and said they wouldn't show up at the public hearing. And I'll leave this gentleman nameless, but one of the heads of one of the environmental groups actually did show up at the public hearing, only for the purpose of taking a picture to determine if we were complying with social distancing rules. Never made a public comment, didn't stay for the meeting, and I was somewhat offended by that. This is a new way of doing business. And for anyone to say to us that if I get on a screen just like I am now and you all see me and I'm talking to you, that those words matter less because we're not in the commissioner's conference room or the what's the name of the room, our big room, Mike, the multi-purpose room, right? Because we're not in there. Is this meeting any less important? Absolutely not. So it's going to take, my point is it's going to take a while first to get people comfortable with the process of being either on a screen this way, calling into a meeting, understanding protocol and how we run through the meeting. And that's both for the meeting organizers and the participants. But then it's also going to take some time to convince them that the information that's provided is as valuable as it would be if I was standing in front of you today. And so that's something we're all going to have to be patient with. It's going to be important for us to have that conversation over and over with folks as we continue to try to do meetings. I think your panel today is phenomenal because all of you live in the public meeting environment, but kind of keep again, those three kind of categories in mind: the strict virtual meeting that we do for business purposes versus the difference at a public meeting level, and then certainly the difference at a public hearing level. And in and amongst that are obviously your public information sessions that you may be doing in order to advance a project in this time. And we've had some questions at DOT about why we continue to work. Well, we continue to work for a lot of reasons, right? Because we have money that we are thankful to get from the federal government, and we are going to continue to spend it and try to meet our timelines. But the most important thing I could say is the reason we work is because government's not shut down. You know, and it's not even really paused, okay? It's realigned. And it was a quick realignment. We often talk, and I'm looking at Andrew and Mike because I know what we've gone through here to realign ourselves to this alternate work location, temporary situation where people are spending the majority of time working at home and only coming to the office for brief periods of time. That happened very quickly, and it's been a huge adjustment. And so we have a lot to learn from this process we've gone through. DOT is going to do a fairly significant after-action conversation with our leadership, not just the assistant commissioners, but others, to say, if God forbid this ever happened again, how quickly do we mobilize and what can we do better? And the public meeting and the continuation of the work program and the capital program is huge. You know, using this time to extend work hours on projects, using this time to convert night work into day work, using this time to continue to meet our June 30th, 2020 capital plan cutoff. So we start fiscal 21, what I'll call on time from a work perspective, is key. We are a huge part of an economic engine that is going to hopefully refuel New Jersey and get us back on our feet sooner rather than later. Because for every job all of you approve or put out, the food truck guys come, right? They go to the work site with breakfast and lunch. They earn a paycheck to take their family to the diner after church on Sunday, or to a movie if they ever open up again on a Saturday evening. Maybe drive-ins will come back in style. Who remembers the old drive-in where you didn't get out of your car, right? Not so bad. But we need to be able to fuel that. So we can't get off course. And so part of that is this public meeting process. And so I think it's phenomenal that you're all on here today. I'm going to stay on if that's okay with all of you, because I just am really interested in hearing the panel's views, because we can all do better, and appreciate the whole team that put this together. Certainly Amanda and Helene and everybody, and Robert and his team always are so supportive of us. And the STIC process. The STIC is a phenomenally successful STIC in not just in New Jersey, not just in this region, but in the country. We've been recognized for that. You should all be very proud of yourselves. That's not me, that's all of you. And so I think so long as we continue to work together the way we have been, I think we'll continue to be very successful. And I think also we'll continue to push work out and show our region of the country just how powerful we are in terms of making sure transportation, all modes, right? Feet, wheels, bikes, cars, trucks, everybody is being served by the network that we build. So, and one last note, because I know it's a big deal. Don't be a knucklehead was not calling anybody a knucklehead. So remember that. It was just reminding people how not to be one. So if you saw our VMS messages for Robert, I can't see Robert on this, but Robert, we got a press inquiry about how many more times they'd see humorous new messages on New Jersey VMS. And I told them not to get used to it. I said, we don't want to wear out a technique and then have people not be responsive to it when we need them to be. So it worked for the weekend. It got a lot of people's attentions, and focused them on not only social distancing, but hopefully driving distances. And some other transportation related comments. But at the end of the day, Andrew, you could be sure, Robert, that we made it clear that this, and Andrew and Sal, that this is not going to be the regular way we message out on the New Jersey state roadways. So with that, I will turn it back over. I guess, Mike, are you going to introduce Robert?
Mike.
I can introduce me.
Yes, hi. Commissioner, be my guest, Commissioner. Okay.
So Robert is somewhere. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm sorry. So Commissioner, thank you, and thank you for joining us today. Next, I want to introduce one of our strongest supporters of our STIC program, which is FHWA's Division Administrator, Mr. Robert Clark. Robert, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, just real briefly. Thank you, Commissioner, for joining us today, and it saved me a phone call, which you just talked to me about, because I had email on my box Monday about the VMS sign. Anyway, I wanted to thank all of you again. Just to reiterate what Mike and Diana both said, there's been so much work put into this over the past 5 years. We've checked every box. And finally, we won a national award, recognized in headquarters by the program offices for things we do. I couldn't be more proud. We almost broke 100 today, which I never thought I would see. We've got 94 people here. I can remember when there was 12. So we've come so far, and it's because of the leadership at the DOT and Colleen's persistence and the TAG group. We don't mention them enough. And the work they do. So I'd like to thank them, and I'm looking forward to the agenda and hopefully a open conversation once we get through them. And now
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert. And hey, I've been around long enough where I remember when this group was 3. It was myself, Mary Amin, and Helene sitting in a room during a snowstorm. We were the only 3 attendees. So absolutely, we've come a long, long way. So with that, I'm going to hand the show over to Amanda Gendek, and Amanda and Helene Roberts will take it from here. Amanda?
Okay, thank you, everyone. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see me okay? And can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So today's feature presentation is about the EDC5 initiative known as Virtual Public Involvement. VPI is the use of digital technology to engage individuals or to visualize projects and plans. And although NJDOT didn't formally commit to implementing VPI in this round, excuse me, of EDC, we do implement it in our daily business, as can be seen by our commissioner's Commitment to Communities platform, our NJDOT Tech Transfer website, NJDOT's increased social media presence, crowdsourcing tools, virtual town halls, video renderings, and 3D visualizations for public meetings and project-specific websites, and that is just to name a few. So we have a terrific group of NJ STIC council members here with us today and associates. So please welcome our guests. I'm going to read their names really quick. We have Jill Stark from FHWA Office of Planning. And of DVRPC, one of our MPOs, we have Barry Seymour and Allison Hastings. Of our second MPO, we have NJTPA, Mary Amin and Melissa Hayes. And also from our third MPO, we have from SJTPO, we have Jennifer Marandino and Alan Huff. And our county representative, we have Joe Attord and Martine Culbertson. From our municipality sector, we have Deanna Stockton. And finally, representing industry, we have Orla Pease from ACOM. Okay. All right, so first up from FHWA, we have Jill Stark.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to mention that I am joined today also with Lana Lau, who is with our Office of Planning and Environment. And she is one of the co-leads of this initiative along with Scott Allen. So we'll both be able to, answer questions at the end. So I guess I'm just going to, Helene, do I just have you advance the slides?
Yeah, it's Amanda. Just let me know when you're ready for the next slide, and I'll just hit next.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Oh yeah, we can definitely move on from that one.
Okay.
So a quick note on what everyday counts is. EDC is a STIC-based model that identifies and rapidly deploys proven yet underutilized innovations. So VPI is one of these initiatives. And we're going to review several VPI tools and techniques. please keep in mind that although FHWA endorses the use of these tools, it doesn't, it's never going to replace an in-person meeting. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the landscape of virtual public involvement tools is broad and diverse. So we organize them into 8 categories, as you can see here. And I'm going to go into each of those very briefly. And please don't be alarmed if you see like a lot of slides. I will be advancing quickly through some of them, but that I just wanted you to have all that information if you want to review it later. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have, next slide, let's see, we've got.
What is happening?
Sorry about that.
That's all right. It's not you, it's me. Okay, is that it? Yep.
Yes, thank you. So on mobile apps, a tool in this category allows individuals to get information and to engage in the planning process wherever they are and whenever they want. This helps to reduce the traditional barriers to participation that have limited involvement in the past. So apps can also make it easy for participants to submit photos of things they like or dislike, and mobile app location services can geotag comments. So that way you can identify them with physical spaces in the state, region, or city. Next slide. And here's an example from Delaware DOT. So they have lots of information, including alerts from the state DOT about construction projects, but also information about transit services, location of electric vehicle charging station links, and information about events. Next slide, please. So here are some popular online engagement platforms that provide mobile app options, and that can enhance options to the public for participation. So you have hundreds of potential uses for these in strategic and long-range planning. So this is just kind of scratching the surface. Next slide. So for project visualization, these tools can be dispersed across online channels such as social media and websites, or presented in person when we can get back to those. Project visualizations complement and enhance in-person engagement and other virtual public involvement techniques. These are particularly useful for involving stakeholders in project development and design, because these can provide stakeholders with a greater sense of what the proposed project will accomplish, and it makes it seem more real. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one is from WSDOT in Washington State, and it develops visualizations to support the department's project development processes. So as you can see here, you can get a better idea of what that project's going to look like, and you kind of have that more engaging, interactive experience. Next slide, please. This example is from FHWA's Federal Lands Transportation Systems, and it shows how 3D visualization can give the public important perspective on the proposed design of a project. This is really important when working to design projects where aesthetics are highly valued by stakeholders. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we have DIY or do-it-yourself videos. Now, many people would rather watch a short video than read through a plan or a report or even a website. Videos can provide important information to people who will be affected by projects in an engaging way. So next slide. So even though this is just a screenshot of UDOT, so UDOT in Utah, they provide up-to-date information to the public about construction operations or maintenance activities. Next slide. Okay, now we have crowdsourcing tools, and these tools are very useful for beginning the conversation about how to spend transportation resources most efficiently and effectively. By sourcing ideas from the public and allowing individuals to vote on these ideas, officials can get a better sense of what the public is interested in seeing. Next slide. Agencies are able to set discussion topics or questions to guide participants. Users contribute their thoughts, but can also vote or comment on other people's suggestions. This example shows a screenshot from Connecticut DOT's crowdsourcing approach used in developing its statewide long-range transportation plan. Next slide. And now we have virtual town halls, which is particularly, prevalent today. So agencies have been successful in reducing barriers to engagement without requiring participants to have internet access or even a smartphone, as they can call in from a landline. In areas where high-speed internet access may not be common, some agencies combine teleconference lines with local TV broadcast. Agencies also sometimes offer simulcasts for non-English speakers to ensure that the limited English proficiency or LEP population in the area can participate. Next slide. The Alamo Area MPO in Texas employs online public meetings to help reduce barriers to engagement in the planning process. The online meetings contain interactive aspects such as mapping and survey tools that people can explore and interact with at their own pace, in addition to a recording of the in-person meeting. And they actually have a very, very extensive and good public involvement process, and really engage the EJ community well. Next slide. So now we have online mapping tools, and this platform allows participants to leave comments and input directly on a web-based map. These help planners and engineers see where the public may want changes or improvements to the system. And because online maps are commonplace, they provide a familiar and comfortable platform for many users. Next slide. So again, we have the Alamo Area MPO. And this one shows where projects proposed for the regional TIP are in the region. And next slide. Utah and Chicago also have similar platforms to that as well. And then Utah DOT also uses story maps and interactive maps to involve citizens early in the project development process. These tools allow them to drop pins and leave comments on the maps to help give officials a better idea of their stance on certain projects. Next slide. And so this also is a continuation to show that breaking down complicated information for the general public. So then you can also zoom into places like your particular neighborhood or block to see information about projects that most directly affect you as a citizen. Okay, next slide, please. So now we've got all-in-one tools. I'm seeing a freeze, but
There we go.
there we go. Okay, platforms, or what we are calling all-in-one tools, are a more complex engagement platform that brings together varied survey, crowdsourcing, and mapping techniques. This category of tools offers a one-stop shop for informing the public about a project and engaging individuals through polls and surveys. Next slide. This is from NCDOT in North Carolina, and they use this, their regions, they were showing a homepage for divisions 5 and 6. This is for the southeast part of the state, but this is in their development for the 2018-2027 STIC. This actually boosted public involvement by 19 times, allowing individuals across the state to easily get involved in outreach efforts. Next slide. And so they also found that not only did this increase the number of participants providing input on projects, but also that many barriers to participation disappeared. This approach increased engagement among younger citizens, which are, the 26 to 40 group, who are often underrepresented. They actually got a really significant, bang for their buck. All right, next slide. Last but not least is digital tools to enhance in-person events. And although online and entirely virtual tools are becoming a bigger part of public involvement, in-person meetings, they're always going to be important. So these tools focus on bringing the technology to individuals with the hope of improving the quality and quantity of engagement. This can be a beneficial way of bridging the digital divide as participants are equally offered any tools they might need. So an example might be an iPad from a street team. They can also be a good way of reaching limited English proficiency, EJ, and other underserved populations. Next slide, please. Okay, so a lot of agencies are using live polling to help enhance the public meeting experience, similar to what we're doing today. The technology allows staff to engage with participants at meetings and display responses in real time. This helps improve the quality of engagement at meetings because every voice is heard rather than just a small group of vocal participants. So another common way is meeting in a box kits. And this provides an easy way to take public involvement activities into the community and for community groups to host their own meetings. This often includes tablets, predefined meeting checklists, worksheets, and it gives structured feedback gathered through a meeting in a box approach, which is easier for an agency to use. Flexibility and convenience of being able to host a meeting at home or a community space without coordinating schedules with agency staff. And then you can also get more people involved in the planning process. Okay, next slide. And next slide again. So this here is, this is our website. We've got a very extensive website that identifies public involvement requirements. It has, so we have all our regulations. It has case studies, examples. Also, a lot of resources related to engaging the public, all created to promote good practices. And we've also been creating, video shorts as well. And I'm sure I'm missing a lot. So, Lana can always chime in too if I'm overlooking. And next slide, please. So I just, I kind of want to just wrap up by saying that the use of virtual public involvement tools, it really does enhance and broaden the reach of our public engagement. And this provides increased transparency and access to transportation planning activities. So our website features many virtual tools, which will provide information in visual and interactive formats that enhance public and stakeholder understanding of proposed projects and plans. Next slide. So here is our fact sheet that has information on benefits, efficiency and low cost, accelerate project delivery, communication, collaboration, expanded engagement. I'll let you guys read that on your own instead of, because I don't want to take up all your time. But next slide, please. So we're currently doing a video and webinar series to provide examples of successful techniques that enhance public involvement. Examples of these videos are pop-up outreach, reaches people who don't attend public meetings, meeting in a box, as I went over earlier, interactive maps, building and engaged social media following, targeted online ads, telephone town halls, story maps, short videos. So we've got a load of great resources that are available now and coming out soon. Next slide. And then we also have this NHI course that's out, which is Basics of Public Involvement in Transit Decision Making. This is a free 4-hour web-based training course. It's offered by NHI. And so this is about effectively engaging the public, with virtual public involvement. In this course, participants discover the importance in transportation decision making. They become more familiar with these techniques that I went over today. And it explores the relationship between public involvement and transportation decision making. So it provides a really good framework for engaging the public using a variety of these approaches. Next slide. Okay. So at this point, I don't know if you want to, and then I'll go to the final slide, I guess, because this is our team, our virtual public involvement team. And Scott Allen and myself from Office of Planning. We've got Keith Moore from the Resource Center. We have Carolyn, Lana, and Bob Washington from the Office of Planning and Environment. And then Human Environment, we have Fleming and Danielle. So do you want to hold questions till the end of all the presentations, or do you want us to?
Yeah, we're going to hold the questions until after all the presentations go.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll be sticking around for the meeting if you have questions later.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jill. All right. And next up from DVRPC, we have Barry Seymour and Allison Hastings.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up? Yes?
Thumbs
Can you hear
up.
me?
Yep.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to start the presentation and then turn it over to Allison. First, I want to thank Mike and Amanda for putting the meeting together and inviting us. And Jill, thank you. That was a great presentation and a good way to kick us off. Next slide, please. So like everyone, we all had to make a very quick transition to work from home. I think over the course of about 4 days, we went from telling staff that they could work from home to recommending that they do work from home to telling them that they had to work from home. Fortunately, we were in a pretty good technological place in order to do that. We had already had a telecommute policy. A number of our staff already telecommuted 1, sometimes 2 days a week. We had the tech in place. Almost everyone had remote access licenses installed on their desktops in the office so that they could access their computers from home. We had moved to the Google Suite so that many of our files were already in the cloud, which you could access the files or your email remotely. We had about 50 Zoom software licenses. I wasn't using it, but a number of staff had already been experimenting with Zoom for different meetings. And we had recently upgraded our bandwidth. So our office was able to accommodate hundreds of people coming into a meeting remotely and keep things going. Next, please. But for me, the sort of the immediate challenge was we had a board meeting scheduled a week after our building closed. So again, we went from sort of telling board members that we invited them to the meeting, and then we told them that they could come to the meeting, but maybe they'd want to access it remotely, to telling them that it had to be remote. And our building was closed, and we had to pivot very quickly to figure out how to do a remote board meeting. So kind of that first week out of the office was kind of a virtual Zoom training session for me and some key staff on figuring out how to make it work. Again, fortunately for us, we had amended our bylaws about 3 years ago to allow for remote voting. At that point, we were thinking a snowstorm in February. We certainly weren't thinking pandemic, but our bylaws enabled us to have a remote meeting. So that wasn't, legally, it wasn't a concern. When we decided to go forward with the meeting, we also decided we wanted to make it as consistent as possible for our board members. The MPOs all know your board meetings involve a lot of choreography among staff, among the board members, among presenters, and there's a lot of sort of routine around that, and we wanted to keep that as close as possible. Next, please. Next, Amanda. Thank you. So when we announced the board meeting and set out the agenda, right up top, we included the link to how to access the Zoom meeting. We also included the phone number for those who did not have the ability to access it via remotely, so that you could still call in and listen in and participate that way. Next, please. So the day of the board meeting, we were posting kind of a series of instructional slides as people were coming on, explaining how Zoom worked, explaining how to raise your hand through Zoom to ask questions, or if you're a member of the public, to be able to enable you to make a public comment. There's Mike Russo as he came on the screen. And then we use the chat box as a way to give instructions. So sort of a continuous conversation as people were coming on and asking questions about the technology, and we were giving information. Next, please. So once the meeting started, we shared the agenda. Normally our first item of business is public comment. We noticed we did have a number of members of the public that were dialed in or to the meeting. And through Zoom, you can control who is an attendee versus who is a panelist. We had members of the public as attendees, so they could listen in, but they could not activate their mics independently. And I think the commissioner made that point earlier about a meeting where people were sort of all talking at once. We found Zoom was a good way to control that. People use the raise hand function, and then I could call on them individually and activate their mic. So in this case, we called on a member of the public to make a comment, who we not only activated his mic, we activated his camera, and he was able to use his camera in real time to show us the issue that he wanted to talk to the board about. So I think he was very satisfied with the ability to do that, and the board members got to see exactly what it was that he was commenting on. The end of his time, I was able to thank him, deactivate his mic, and move on to business. Next, please. So to date, we've had 2 full board meetings. Our board members have been able to ask questions, make motions. We've approved actions. We did our virtual around the table, where all board members, one at a time, were able to speak and give reports on what was going on in their jurisdictions, which they really appreciated. We had a variety of staff sharing their screens to make presentations. We had a remote guest from New York make a presentation on the Gateway project. We had good public participation and engagement. Public was able to make comments and be able to speak to the board as a whole. And what's interesting is we've had, normally we'll get 50, maybe 60 people at a board meeting. We've had close to 90 people at both of these virtual board meetings. So we're actually getting more participation, and a number of members of the public that have asked us to continue this going forward. So we're looking at revising our conference room and our AV system to allow remote access even when we're back in the office. Next, please. So this is just a list of some of the larger meetings we've had. I feel like I have a Zoom meeting 2 or 3 times a day since we're out, but this is just some of the bigger meetings where we've had over 100 people participating, and Zoom has just been a great platform for us. That I find that it gives us a good control, and it's worked well. We haven't had any Zoom bombers yet, but we're being careful around that. So with that, let me turn it over to Allison, and she can take us the rest of the way through our presentation.
Thanks, Barry. Next slide, please. So some of what I'm going to talk about is like our public participation, but then also training for staff. So how we've gotten staff members comfortable with online meetings. So first, we understood a lot and are committed to public participation. So that things that we already knew were hurdles before are harder now in an online only environment. On the bright side, those that are already engaged with us, like people who are already involved, interested, want to communicate with us, that just got a little bit easier, if not a lot more easier for them by going online. And we'll see over the next few months as our public outreach really turns up. Our public outreach schedule goes into hyperdrive in May and June if those numbers continue. Next slide. So bridging the digital divide, I won't go into this really long because I know SJTPO is going to talk about it. But these are things that we found Zoom platform to be really helpful for, and the need to have a call-in only function is very helpful and necessary for people who are not connected to the internet. Next slide. We're diving really deep into understanding how our chosen platform, Zoom, all the different tools that they have available for us to be able to use to accommodate differently abled attendees, such as the hearing impaired, as well as for limited English proficiency, different speakers, creating a Spanish audio channel, for example, like Jill Stark mentioned in her presentation. Next slide. And my office, the Office of Communications and Engagement, we really went all in for remote meetings during this time period. First, we saw that this time period possibly being much longer, and that there will be a hesitancy to meet in person, especially with strangers, for a public meeting for a long time afterwards. So we did 2 staff trainings in about 3 weeks that focused on taking our meetings and our meeting culture online. We didn't focus on how-to for Zoom or for the different tools that we have, because those tools are really good at putting up like 1-minute videos for how to do this, how to do that. What we really focused on was how this tool or this feature meets DVRPC's meeting purpose, public participation needs. We were really looking for that transition from in-person to online. Next slide. And here's a screenshot of a training that some of my staff, including me, this is my colleague Shoshana Akins in the corner, a screenshot of a training that we did. We did a pre-training survey, so we were able to share the results with the attendees. And then you can also see in the chat box how active it is. Staff members are sharing tips in this chat box. They're answering each other's questions. They're sharing their experiences. We found the chat box to be like really interactive, very active, and a whole nother element of these engaging meetings. Next slide. So to wrap up staff trainings, all of these like internal trainings that we did, and I'm sure our colleagues on the call, we're going to other people's online meetings that people are hosting to see how they go. We're doing outside webinars and trainings to learn best practices, best tips. It's really helping DVRPC staff, and particularly the communications and engagement staff, to use the tools we already have access to, and then use those advanced features that we've always wanted to get to know, but we didn't necessarily have time to do in person when you're already prepping so many things for an in-person event. We're also taking our facilitator skills and transitioning them to online. So the lead facilitator or MC or host of this meeting, of any online meeting, is really building their facilitation muscle. So people there find ways to English online, thumbs up when people want to hear you. Great tools. Calling on people to speak who haven't spoken yet. Those are things that we can do online that are really important to do. For in person as well. So while COVID-19 has disrupted our work and has permanently changed our work in ways that we don't even know yet, the communications and engagement staff is really excited and grateful to have the opportunity to invest in these skills. So next slide, and that's our last slide.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Barry and Allison. Next from NJTPA, we have Mary Amin and Melissa Hayes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And I'm going to just set the table a little bit for this discussion, and then I will hand the I guess the microphone or the mouse pad over to Melissa Hayes. But not to repeat what some of the other folks have said, but our experience was somewhat similar. The NJTPA began working remotely in its entirety the week prior to the Governor's Executive Order number 107. We had begun to transfer to work from home, but just before the executive order was issued, we had already converted to entirely working from home. So we had to shift gears and begin conducting a lot of our business through online meetings, such as the one that we're in the process of participating in right now. And of course, we had to postpone some of those meetings that required in-person participation, because at that point we just weren't sure how to go about doing that. We needed time to assess how the best way to engage people virtually would be. And that's really the point of our discussion today. Our staff researched what other MPOs and what other state DOTs were doing across the country. How are they engaging the public in a virtual environment? And what were some best practices? So I'd like to just, at this point, say a thank you and a shout out to the NJTPA's Deputy Executive Director Dave Barrett, who's on this call today, as well as our Senior Manager of Outreach, Melissa Hayes, who's going to present next. But also there are many unnamed folks, our entire IT staff who work miracles, as well as the rest of our communications and outreach staff. So it was a Herculean effort for which I'm and our board are very grateful. The reason this slide is up, it's talking about some of the business that we've conducted already, and unlike DVRPC, who had their trial by fire immediately, we had the luxury of having a few weeks to prepare. And so over the course of about 7 weeks' time, we've held several important meetings, business meetings that required action. We had our Regional Transportation Advisory Council, as well as 3 of our board committees, Project Prioritization and Planning and Economic Development Committees, as well as our Freight Initiatives Committee. And those meetings all went quite well. And we are now going to be hosting our first virtual full board meeting this coming Monday. So you're all invited. However, as we become a little bit more flexible and adept at holding and conducting business through these virtual meetings, we do want to make sure that we engage the public in a meaningful way. If in the event that we're not able to participate in any more in-person meetings for the foreseeable future. This next slide, if you can go to the next slide, Amanda. This is probably something for the archives and for the time capsule, because we may not be seeing gatherings like this for quite a while. But as I mentioned, and as Melissa will get into momentarily, we've been researching different kinds of best practices and tools that we can use to supplement this lack of in-person participation. And things that we'll be suggesting are things like online maps and project websites, which, while they're not really new to transportation planning by any means, in the past they've been more of an adjunct or a supplement, and now we're pressing them into service to be front and center in engaging and gathering public feedback. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Hayes. As I said, she's our Senior Manager of Outreach, and she will go through some of the best practices that I mentioned, give you some examples that we're working on right now, and of course share some lessons that have been learned.
Henry, come over here quickly.
And I hope that whoever's got their speakers on.
The new Zoom link
Melissa,
was posted for now.
take it away.
There was a problem with the last Rhode Island. Yeah, go in there now.
I don't think they realize they're talking.
Trying to find
No, she's about to, but she's not
Amanda, can
finished
you
yet.
hit the next slide for me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll try and talk louder. So as Mary mentioned, when we started working from home about 6 weeks ago now, I guess, mid-March, we realized very quickly that we were going to have to shift a lot of in-person events to virtual events. We had several meetings lined up for studies that were concluding, and obviously weren't going to be able to have those meetings in person. So we did some research. We actually started with FHWA's virtual public involvement webinar series, which we've been fortunate enough to participate in the past, and reviewed those to see what folks are doing. Because as Mary mentioned, we've always had these online components, but they were never the main outreach tool. They were always supplemental. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we were doing, we were going to be engaging as many people as possible and using the best possible tools to do that. We also reached out to some DOTs about projects that they did. Oregon DOT, for example, does a really cool online open house website that I reached out to them to get some information about how they do that. And they actually found that it's been really good in engaging folks in rural areas where people might not want to travel far for an in-person meeting. So it's something they've been doing for a long time, and they've gotten a lot of input that way. So we put together this virtual public engagement best practices document. It's on our website. Feel free to use it. We're using it for our studies, and we're encouraging our subregions to use it too. The main takeaways we got from folks that we talked to were to know your audience and really think about it, because it will help you to decide which tools are best to conduct outreach for different studies in different areas. Keep it brief. A lot of the DOTs and MPOs we spoke to that do these online open house type meetings say to keep the presentations to 30 minutes or less, and then leave at least 30 minutes or more if there's a lot of folks online to do a live Q&A. Provide multiple feedback channels. People can do live Q&A. They can submit email after the fact. A lot of folks will post the recordings online so people can watch it on their own terms and provide feedback. Extend the public comment period. Maybe instead of a week or two, it's a month, so people have time to see what's out there and give you feedback. And the biggest thing is to make it mobile friendly. This is really important. I know some folks have asked in the chat about, reaching low income folks and harder to reach individuals. There's data from the Pew Research Center that shows that 71% of people with household incomes under $30,000 have smartphones. So, while they're very low income, they do have access to mobile websites and things like that. But only 54% of them have computers, and only 56% have broadband in their homes. So it's really important that anything you do can be viewed on a mobile device. Next slide. So one of the, I wanted to kind of talk about some lessons that we've learned in doing some virtual events so far. One of the events we had planned in person was a meeting of our Up Next Young Adult Advisory Group. We were supposed to go to Asbury Park in late March. That obviously didn't happen, but we still wanted to get feedback from them for our long range plan update, because that was the focus of that meeting. So what we decided to do was hold an online discussion about disruptors and game changers and how they affect long range planning. Not only the pandemic, which we obviously talked about, but also other things like climate change and technology. So we had this online discussion. We learned that our topic was way too broad. We were trying to cover too much in a small amount of time. It seemed like people didn't weigh in as much as they might normally, because we just had so many different ideas and topics floating out there. We also had some technology issues. A couple of the members did mini presentations, and some of them had bad broadband quality, and so they kept dropping out. So we realized you kind of have to learn to adapt on the fly. In the future, maybe we won't try and have that person log back in 5 different times. We'll just go to the next presentation. But also, we needed to narrow the topic and not be so broad. So we're going to do these again in the future, but we're going to do like a mini series where each one talks about one individual disruptor instead of trying to cover them all in one event. Next slide. So this is a wiki map. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, you know, and you probably use them in your own studies. But what's interesting about this is our main avenue local concept development study in the city of Passaic. And I don't know if you can see it, but this is actually a screenshot from a Facebook Live event last week. The mayor of Passaic has a huge Facebook following, several thousand people. And the city also has several thousand people that follow their Facebook page. So this kind of speaks to the knowing your audience. They knew that people in the city of Passaic go to Facebook to get their information from the mayor. So the mayor decided, since folks can't be out with tablets right now, encouraging people to take that survey or do this wiki map, that he would do a Facebook Live, and they did like a live demonstration, and they had over, I think you can see it in the tiny print, 1.2 thousand people were on for this live event. So it was pretty amazing. If you hit the next slide, it should show you. He also went through the survey, and I just wanted to mention that Passaic has a large Spanish-speaking population. So the business administrator gave a presentation in English, and then the mayor came on and went through it in Spanish. So they were able to address both audiences on this Facebook Live event, which was really great. Next slide. And then I just wanted to give some examples of other events that were meant to be in person and have shifted to online, and just the different ways that they're being done. We've kind of let the subregions decide what is the best way for them to engage their constituents virtually for their different studies. So this is a flyer for the Jersey City Parking Plan Subregional Study. They actually met on Monday night at a city council meeting. They decided to use an existing public meeting where they knew they'd have a large audience, an already engaged public platform, and they did a presentation on the study rather than doing a separate public meeting. And then they have information up on the website where people can go and submit comments for a couple more weeks. This was neat. They used Microsoft Teams for their city council meeting. And in addition to English, I believe there were 5 other languages available through translations through that platform. So they were able to engage folks from the different communities in the city. For Passaic County, they also have a sub-regional study going on right now, the Patterson to Newark Market Transit Market Study. And they decided they don't have you know, the following like Jersey City does for these live city council meetings. They decided instead to use the project website and to pre-record a presentation. They're also going to translate it into Spanish because they also have a large Spanish speaking population in the study area. They're going to post it on their website, and they're going to allow for comments to be submitted via the website. I think they're going to post a survey. They also have an email address, and I believe there's a phone number people can call to give feedback. And they're going to have Essex County also posting information online, and they're going to be promoting it through their social media. So that was another option. And then the last study I wanted to mention is our freight concept development study with Morris County. They were supposed to have an event in Dover literally days after we all got the stay-at-home order. So they've decided to do a live virtual event. They're going to use GoToMeeting like we're using today. They're also going to record it and post it to the study website after the fact. So if people can't be at the meeting live, they will be able to watch the recording again and submit comments. There's information on the website about how to comment. They're also going to post some study documents. This is to present the preliminary preferred alternative. So they're going to post whatever information they typically have at an open house. All of that information is going to go onto the study website. And they're going to have a Spanish interpreter online for the meeting. And they also are going to have some of the documents translated into Spanish online. Next slide. And then I just wanted to mention, you know, specialized outreach. We've really relied on in-person events in the past to reach low-income folks and limited English-speaking communities. We've gone to ESL classes, which is the top 2 photos here. We've also met with community groups that serve low-income populations, as the bottom photo here. And we wanted to make sure we're still engaging these folks, especially if they don't have access to broadband or they can't go online. So we were planning, we've been working on rather, a project to create these community liaisons, where we've been reaching out to different community groups that serve these populations to get people to agree to share information on our behalf with their groups. It was originally envisioned that they would do this at meetings and events in person. We're now reaching out to them again and saying, how are you engaging with your constituents during the quarantine, and what are the best tools that we could use to engage with these folks? So we're doing kind of an informal survey of these community groups, and we'll be interested to hear what they say. We just started a few days ago, so we don't have any information to share yet, but I'd be happy to share what we get once we hear back. And that is it for our presentation.
Okay. Muted. Unmuted.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mary and Melissa. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I got a notice that I was muted. Okay, just checking. Okay, so next from SJTPO, we have Jennifer Marandino and Alan Huff.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me well. I'm going to just start the presentation off and then kick it over to Alan as much as everyone else has done.
Right before you get started, I'm sorry. Yep. If everybody can mute themselves to minimize the background noise, that would be really appreciated. Unless you're speaking, just mute your phone or use the buttons on your GoToMeeting screen to mute yourself.
Amanda, this is Helene.
Hi.
There are some people on that I can mute most people if they're unmuted, but there are some web users that we cannot mute. So
right.
Please go on and mute yourselves. I have sent you audio pins so we can get you muted. Thanks.
Okay.
Helene, you should be able to mute all and then just unmute the next speakers if you want to try that.
Yeah, there are some people that I cannot mute.
Oh.
They are web users and I am unable to mute them. So, okay. Yeah, so I'm just encouraging them to please get muted.
Okay, we'll try to manage it as we go along. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so like my counterparts in DVRPC and NJTPO, SJTPO has been working remotely since March 17th, and operations, I will say, are not shut down, and employees, as most everyone indicated, are continuing to work from home and kind of still provide those essential services to the public and make progress on our critical needs of the region. We are just about to release our regional transportation plan. So to say our public outreach is going to kick into high gear is a little bit of an understatement. We have requested an extension of that approval, and you'll get a little bit more feel for why that is when Alan starts about some of the challenges that we actually have in our region. This certainly is very challenging times, and it's resulted in some different changes and challenges, and kind of working on the fly and doing some of the things that we ultimately wouldn't normally do in the office and engaging with the public. But we're trying to manage that as best we can. I will just say, to the commissioner's point, we do have a Delsey drive-in theater down here in South Jersey. So one opens, maybe you'll want to take a trip down there when, likely before some of the in-office activity begins. So we can turn that right over to Alan.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Jen, and thanks for allowing me a few minutes to talk about our experience in SJTPO as we've been going through this process. Next slide, please. All right. So we started going digital like everyone else. We had not really committed to a virtual public meeting tool prior to this, so it kind of forced our hand to take it a little bit more seriously and take a look. We ultimately ended up selecting GoToMeeting, which was very inexpensive. I think it was like $12 a month or something. So prior to finalizing the selection, we did actually have a special meeting of our technical advisory committee and policy board. So that was done as a teleconference meeting. So we did have a call-in information available for the public that was posted and shared via social media and our email as well. And aside from that, all of our other planned meetings have been postponed at this time to kind of come up with our plan going forward, and also as we kind of figure out just how long this is going to go on and to what degree going forward. So next slide. Next slide, please. There you go. So the two big concerns that we've been looking at as we made decisions to kind of push things back was one, the ability for the public to devote attention to some of these planning efforts. There's a lot of other issues that they're dealing with right now that, at least for some of these efforts, are frankly more important. And the big one is internet access. Next slide. So looking at households with internet in our region, and I'll just say up front that there are a lot of different ways to slice and dice the data. We looked at households with internet subscription. We considered things like, we looked at cell phone data in our region that accounts for an extra 3% or so. So that takes us up to, 82, 83% when you include cell phones in this. Some of the things that we considered was if you're relying on cell phones, particularly in low-income areas, the cell phone service might not allow for a lot of data without incurring additional costs. So we wanted to be a little bit careful there. But the important thing is to note that there are a lot of different ways to slice and dice the data. And I think either way we look at it, we have a lot of households in the region that have little or no access to internet. So while New Jersey as a whole has a little bit better access than the country overall, the STIC region has less internet access. And the lack of access is vastly represented in low income and communities of color in our region. Next slide. So here is a map. Again, this is the access to internet subscription from the ACS. And so anything in green is where we are at or above the national average. So everything that's yellow, orange, and especially red is below or well below the national average. If you click ahead one more slide, please. And one more time. So you can see that some of the areas in our city centers, animations one more time. Some of our city centers have especially low access to internet. You can see that there are small pockets in places like Vineland, Millville, Salem, but the two big ones that pop up are Bridgeton, where as few as 44% of households have access to internet, to Atlantic City, where we have block groups with 29% having access to internet. So this is really problematic, but it also gives us a lot of information that we haven't looked at in quite this way before. So I'll talk a little bit in coming slides, but there's just a lot more that we can do in some of these areas. Next slide. So looking at this, it's kind of something you can infer from the previous slide, but access to internet is not an equal proposition. When we look at block groups in our region, where less than 55% of households had access to internet, the population of Hispanic or racial minority was almost 82%. Compare that to 38% 839% is our regional average. And then in contrast, when you get to block groups that are at or above the national average, 85% internet access, they're overwhelmingly white non-Hispanic households. So you see only 28% are Hispanic or racial minority. And you see the exact same stark contrast when you look at poverty in households. Our regional average poverty is 14.3%, well over double that poverty in areas with little internet access, and about half the regional average when you're looking at areas with above the national average access to the internet. Next slide. So it posed us to ask the question, how can we provide equitable input opportunity in a virtual-only environment? Given the data that we're seeing, given the tools that we have available in the region, the answer was very much that we cannot. And what I'm talking about here is equitable opportunity to outreach with virtual-only tools. Right now, that's just, it doesn't feel very possible to us. Next slide. So what can we do? So first, we all agreed we need to be as flexible as we possibly can. Some efforts, need to advance now, and some do not. And the ones that do not, for us, we feel strongly should not advance. Anything that is of great importance to the region or has major implications for disadvantaged communities, those are the things that we need to prioritize, trying to hold back on as much as we can until we have opportunities to try to get to the people that don't have that access. So, as Jen mentioned, for us, our regional transportation plan, we were set to approve that in July. We've asked for a 6-month extension. We're going to do public outreach virtually in June and July. But then our hope is that we might be able to get some more traditional outreach out there later on as the months go on. Otherwise, we might have to continue to look for other tools and other innovations to try to reach those groups. Similarly, we have a technical study for multilingual outreach for our language assistance plan. That is an effort that is deliberately targeting disadvantaged communities. So, we want to make sure that we're not leaving people out. Similarly, our Cumberland County Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Action Plan, which identified, projects in locations with biped safety issues. All of our biped safety issues are in disadvantaged communities. And so the projects we're looking at are in disadvantaged communities, and they are exactly the communities on the map that had very low access to internet. So, we just want to be very deliberate and very careful. Hopefully, we'll be in a position to do some more traditional outreach as the months continue. And if not, as I said, we'll have to look for more innovative ways to try to reach folks. As we can't postpone forever, obviously. One of the things that we just try to remind ourselves is that virtual involvement is a complement to traditional involvement. And while circumstances have absolutely changed with COVID-19, we just need to remember that traditional involvement exists for a reason, and we need to try to make sure that we're addressing the concerns that go with that. Next slide, please. So there are areas where virtual outreach, we feel is acceptable. We had, for example, a project that was two roundabout projects, interestingly enough, and the areas that had, pretty uniformly high internet access, and surprisingly, given their roundabouts, they're not terribly controversial because the intersections are so bad right now. That people actually seem to like that project. But so that was an example of a location where we felt fairly confident moving forward virtual only. There are some additional opportunities for input down the road, so it didn't seem like a terribly high risk. And in some projects, there's just no choice but to move forward, and those are the areas where you have to find ways to make it work. So, with that, we just do the best we can. We spread the word through as many partners as possible with the Roundabout project I mentioned. We're sharing information with all of the neighboring municipalities and even the neighboring county. People drive through roads outside of their municipality, so just trying to get that word out however we can. Continue the newspaper advertisements, like was talked about before, providing toll-free telephone options to participate when we do virtual outreach. One of the things we were talking about in the Roundabout project was if we could put information out that people could pick up handouts or see kiosks or something where they didn't have to be manned, but if they didn't have access to the visual part of virtual involvement, they could see what we were talking about today. And then we keep looking for best practices, innovative approaches. We've heard a lot of things today from the other participants, so a lot of things for us to take back with us. And beyond that, we ask ourselves and we ask you, what else can we do? Kind of where we're left with. Next slide. Ended on a positive note, right? This is making SJTPO better. This will make SJTPO better. As I said before, there were certain virtual components that we hadn't dug into. And so, we're scratching the surface with GoToMeeting. It prompted us to really dig deeper. We knew that there were areas in our region that didn't have strong internet access. We didn't understand, I think, just how poor the internet access was in some parts of the region and how much that lack of access was tied directly to income and race. So those are things that we really need to look at as we go forward. We can target our physical outreach to areas of disadvantage where they have low internet access. And we have data more than just hunch now on where that is. We will definitely need to revisit elements of our public involvement plan and update it with some of the things that we're learning through this process. And then, I mentioned our RTP. When we're able to start outreach, hopefully, we'll need to, think a little bit more about some of the locations and the approach that we're looking at. Next slide, we have a map. Next slide, please. So this is the map I showed you earlier, and it highlights the blue are the 4 locations where we were originally planning on holding our RTP public meetings. So we were looking for not just areas that were disadvantaged, but we were looking for areas with access, and we were looking for areas that served, provided social services if possible to try to reach people where they already were. And I think that generally speaking, what we did is good, but I think what we can clearly see from this map is that there are a lot of areas left that we're for and accessing. So, maybe it's tweaking some of our locations, maybe it's adding some locations, but these are areas that, can't participate virtually. I think the next step is looking at zero vehicle households and how that overlaps with this data too, and taking a look and seeing what communities we really need to make sure that we have a physical presence in when we do the outreach for the RTP, and then just in general going forward. And then the next slide is the end. And that's it for me. And yeah, when it's all said and done, we're happy to take questions, but thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Jennifer and Alan. Just so everybody knows, when I click it, to advance the next slide, there's a little bit of a delay, so don't think that I forgot about you. There's just like a few second delay when it shows up on your screen. Okay, so next from Monmouth County, we have Joe Ator and Martine Culbertson. I'm going to make sure that you guys are not muted. Joe and Martine, are you able to?
I think I'm on.
Okay, Joe,
Amanda?
you're on.
I'm here too.
Okay, good. Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Good morning, everyone. This morning, I wanted to focus on the challenges we are facing at the county level on two active county projects, which are on very different phases of the capital project delivery process. The first project in the photograph on your left is in the final design phase, and it consists of the replacement of a double-leaf bascule bridge identified as County Bridge S32. And the second project in the photograph on your right is in the local concept development phase, which is in the first phase of the three planning and design phases prior to construction. In the concept development phase for this project, we are developing our recommendation for alternatives for the rehabilitation or the replacement of this movable bridge identified as Bridge S31. Both bridges are being funded using federal funds, and Monmouth County is very appreciative of the guidance and support of our project partners, which includes FHWA, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, New Jersey DOT, and our engineering consultant teams. Public participation and involvement is an important component of any federally funded project. And while Monmouth County is moving towards integrating virtual public involvement as part of our traditional public participation plan, COVID-19 has forced us to postpone all planned public meetings and to fully transition to virtual public involvement. And since these two projects are in very different stages of development, they present different challenges. Next slide, please. As I said before, the first project is in the final design phase of a project to replace the Rumson-Seabright Bridge, S32, over the Shrewsbury River. The estimated cost for the replacement of this bridge is $97 million, and our schedule anticipates receiving federal authorization for construction in the 2020 fiscal year, so that the project can be advertised for bid this winter and construction can start in the spring of 2021. The public outreach plan for this project included a series of local officials meetings, community stakeholder meetings, and public information centers. The most recent community stakeholder meeting was held on February 18, 2020, and we had planned a March 2020 final public information center prior to COVID-19. Next slide, please. To keep our project on schedule, we have been working with all our project partners that I mentioned earlier, and are very fortunate that on both of our projects, our consultant team includes the firm of M.A. Culberson as the project's public outreach facilitator, and you will hear from Martine Culberson in a moment. As you can see from the schedule on the slide, proceeding with the final public information center is critical to keeping Bridge S32 funded in this federal fiscal year. And we have no choice but to move forward with the virtual public involvement. Next slide, please. We have come a long way on the design of Bridge S32, and we have had consistent public involvement and support for this project. The proposed construction consists of building a replacement bridge on a new alignment while we carry traffic on the existing bridge. And once the new bridge is completed, we can demolish the existing. Maintaining traffic during construction was one of the key project goals identified by the public early in the process. Other concerns were traffic, staging, impacts, and impacts to adjacent parkland, businesses, and residential properties. In the remaining virtual public information meeting, we will be presenting the final design and addressing public comments. Next slide, please. The second project in the is in the initial of the three project delivery phases, which is the local concept development phase. And this second federally funded project will evaluate rehabilitation or replacement of Bridge S31, which is a 1/2 mile long bridge over the Navesink River which connects the municipalities of Rumson and Middletown. Next slide, please. Similar to the other project, we have had local officials meeting, community stakeholder meetings, and public information centers. However, since we are in the early concept development phase, critical decisions have yet to be made. And a critical and controversial issue on this project has been whether to reconstruct this bridge as a low-level movable or whether it will be replaced with a high-level fixed-span bridge. The schedule on the slide shows that we plan to conclude our public information outreach for the concept development phase this summer so that we can advance this project to the second phase, preliminary engineering, by this winter. As I mentioned before, we are very fortunate to have the consultant firm of M.A. Culberson as our public outreach facilitator on the team for both projects. And I will now turn it over to Martine, who will explain our virtual public involvement approach on the two different projects. Well, yours, Martine.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Next slide, please. The Rumson Seabright Bridge website that we have already in place provides a special means to share information and obtain input. It's really helpful for those unable to attend meetings in person because there are photos, meeting reports that are already posted on the site. The website's especially helpful too for newcomers, whether they're residents, businesses, and even the agency representatives who call our office and say, I don't know anything about this project. They can learn about the project from beginning, that it was a bridge study, and all the way to the current phase. It's an innovative website. As you can see, the features listed to the left. We designed it to be useful on desktop, tablets, and mobile devices. As you can see, the upper right pictures, those are the images of the home page on all three devices. It's available in all languages via Google Translate, also available right on the home page. We can add rich media such as videos, pop-up panels. The lower right shows an interactive location map that's under the maps and plans. And most importantly, we can track website activity and distribute that to the project team on a monthly basis. It's a Google Analytics report that you see on the lower right. That report, as it indicates, Stokes Creative Group is the one that provides the technical implementation of the website. And what our office provides is the contact, all the content and contact to the system, which is, as a professional facilitator, my role is the people, process, and information, how to make it all come together. But it's truly a collaborative team approach, and updating the website is an action item at each status meeting with the entire project team. So how can we implement a public meeting now that we aren't able to gather in large numbers due to COVID-19 at present? Next slide, please. Here you see on the left is the home page. It has light blue icons for quick access to about the project, community outreach, what's new, and contact us. There's a dark blue main menu with additional drop downs for all sorts of information. On the right, I showed the contact us page just for your viewing. Because this site is the go-to place for project information by communities, we're creating a virtual public meeting to take place right on this website. In the lower right, you see an example of how there will be a pop-up panel to click on the home page. The visitor will then go to a sign-in page, similar to entering a public meeting and going to the sign-in table. Once they enter their name and address, their email address that is, and they can put their contact for mailing as well, they can open and view the handouts normally picked up at the sign-in table, or they can do that later. A public meeting page will then open where the attendees can select among different icons and boxes. That's similar to workstations in an open house public meeting in person. There'll be a video clip for opening remarks from Freeholder Director Thomas Arnone. There's going to be a project overview video clip from Joe Ator himself, county engineer. Then the attendees can also choose to watch a project presentation that's going to consist of a recorded voiceover PowerPoint slides of the final design plans and construction staging. They can then select icons to ask questions or submit comments. The questions icon will open to a window with options to submit questions online for email response or request a phone call to speak to a project team member. The icon for submitting comments into the process will open to a pick comment form, and it can be completed online or printed out and completed by hand and mailed in. There'll also be a thank you for visiting the meeting, where we will also offer what's called a quick pick poll to ask just a few quick click questions about their experience to determine and see if this is an effective format from the attendees' perspective. There will be a note that attendees can return anytime during the 30 days, and after the 30 days, the meeting will close. However, the presentation will be posted under community outreach, together with all comments received during the 30 days. That's similar to what we've done in past meetings, so they'll be able to do the same thing for this meeting. The team will use Google Analytics to track the public meeting activity weekly. And the sign-in sheet will allow us to track attendance and enter and identify a number of times each person visits the meeting. So what about the Oceanic virtual PIC meeting? Next slide, please. Here is the project website for the Oceanic Bridge, and you can see under what's new, meeting postponed. The Oceanic Bridge, as Joe had mentioned, is in the LCD study, not the final design phase. The study had prior public meetings. However, the last public meeting had over 300 written comments received when the conceptual alternatives were presented, and the public had very strong opposing opinions. The alternative analysis and recommended preliminary preferred alternative has not been presented to the public yet, but as Joe had mentioned, was to take place. Actually, that one was March 19th when the COVID-19 situation occurred. The project team is still discussing the virtual public meeting format for this one. So I'll come back to that thought. Next slide, please. So what can we share with the STIC panel about best practices and innovative tools? Here we go. For the upcoming virtual PIC meeting on S32, we've drafted and will mail letters inviting property owners and stakeholders to attend the online meeting. As we've done successfully, we'll post to newspapers, municipal websites, and we email blast the public online meeting notice with the PIC comment forms that encourages input from the public. For an effective and innovative tools, we're going to look into what we call the facilitator's toolbox, possibly a banner with a website address hung on the bridge. To connect to those hard to reach populations, we'll enhance communication by linking to the schools in the area, chamber, commerce, and neighborhood associations to distribute our email meeting notice to their list of parents, employees, and members. To reach those who have limited internet access, which was raised in the earlier discussion, we suggest posting flyers at the essential services locations such as grocery stores, gas stations, given COVID-19, so they know of the virtual PIC meeting, but it will also include a telephone number to request a hard copy of the presentation and a pre-recorded telephone line that one can listen to. It's possible to also provide the script for those that are hearing impaired. This option will also be included in the meeting invitation letter. Now, for online engagement software, that last lucky one, it's to be determined, TBD, to be determined, depending on objectives of the meeting, which application or software may give us the results the team's looking for or needs. So what are the challenges we face with both of these bridge projects? Next slide. Thanks. Technology catch-up. This is a challenge for the county and the public, especially online engagement software and different learning curves for everyone. That's hosts and participants. And having technical support to assist is critical. So as the comic illustrates, level participation field is of all ages, cultures, socioeconomic considerations. And it's not only equal access, but how comfortable or willing to participate. Or in the case of some, you may have a lot of people willing to participate. Communication limitations. This is a really neat challenge. What I like in my field is that 60 to 90% is nonverbal. Images on the right show that all body communicates an atmosphere and that online is different. It's just different. There are 10 types of nonverbal communication, and some can be accommodated online, but others not. So it's to be aware of these different nonverbal cues and how many may influence what's being communicated, and the choice of the online approach to meet the objectives for our public meetings is what we're trying to achieve. So how do we handle Q&A sessions of a public meeting with opposing opinions? This is the key challenge for the Oceanic Bridge project. Security from hacking, control of messages, and glitches during live meetings are challenges that you've all have suddenly experienced. When dealing with, though, a bridge project with opposing public opinions, that's elevated because they have the potential to give momentum to an opposition cause or could instill a lack of trust. Now, it's not bad. There is encryption. There are means to address some of these challenges, but it's a reason why we're still in discussion on the virtual PIC for the Oceanic Bridge. As we review the variety of communication means that I show in the lower left, we're looking at what we can do best. So in summary, the team chose a virtual PIC meeting on the existing web platform for Bridge S32 because it is familiar. People are used to going to it. And anything we can do to make the online process convenient, easy to use, welcoming, and interactive will encourage participation and maintain a comfort level that enforces trust in the support we've built and have for that project. Our hope is to likewise do it for the Oceanic Bridge as well, in executing an appropriate format that'll give the virtual public meeting the ability to meet its goals and objectives. So with that, one thing I can say is the facilitators, there is a time before computers and projects got done. So as the commissioner said, we're just realigning. We need to look at and go back in our toolbox and use the skills that we might not have used for a while that can be applied now. And that's what we're looking into for Oceanic Bridge. So with that, next steps, next slide. Thank you. The team is looking forward to this, but we don't want to, as you see, the implementation for Bridge S32 is that we anticipate it will be in May through June. For Bridge S31, the implementation is anticipated in July to August. As Joe mentioned at the beginning, we need to meet the project schedule. But as noted, the team doesn't want to have both at the same time period because it would, to minimize information overload. And since one community is involved in both projects, we want to give each project its own attention. So one is going to construction in the fall and the other isn't for 4 to 6 years. That's a lot for public to digest. So that's where we stand now, and we look forward to the Q&A. Thank you for listening, and I'll pass it back to the next presenter.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joe and Martine. Next up, we have Deanna Stockton from the municipality of Princeton.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to provide to you the municipal perspective on virtual public involvement. And thanks to all of the previous presenters with their valuable insights. Next slide. I found this very insightful quote for everybody to read over, but it really brings into focus in our minds as to what's essential during a pandemic. And municipal governments now have an opportunity to really add value to their residents. And one of the ways to add that value is to look to the future and how do we change and adapt our community engagement strategies going forward. And one of those innovations that will help us is virtual public involvement.
Didn't even my last one. Didn't even my last one.
Next slide, Amanda. So before COVID, much of our public engagement was focused on in-person interactions, whether it was one-on-one public meetings with residents, council meetings, project meetings. You know, municipal staff puts the face on government, and we build the relationships within our community. We work in the city hall, and you know, it's our responsibility to be available to the public when they come to the counter or they call on the phone and want to have visits at their houses. So while we utilize different VPI applications pre-COVID, utilizing things for, say, council meeting agendas, the ability for residents to provide feedback about different issues in town. A lot of our interactions were to put information outward rather than bringing feedback back into the community. And so other examples might be that the police departments utilize Everbridge and Reverse 911 for emergency alerts. Engineering department, planning departments have websites for different projects and putting that construction mode. As towns get bigger, they obviously have more tools, so they have more of the ability to use social media. And obviously big big towns like Hoboken and Jersey City has even more resources. But with the onset of COVID, we really had to think about a new way of doing business. Our IT professionals became hugely important. As I said, our job was to work in City Hall and to interact with the public. So they had to ramp up and figure out ways for us to work remotely. We didn't necessarily have all those tools in place that a lot of the others like DVRPC already had. We had to purchase computers. Some town people don't even have cell phones, like staff people. So these were all things that faced municipalities with COVID. But I have to say, all of the staff in municipalities really have to be commended for stepping up and embracing the new reality that we're faced with at this time. So with COVID, some of the things that have changed, obviously, are the virtual public meetings with video conferencing for Meet the Mayors and different board meetings. We're even using it for pre-construction meetings and your weekly construction meetings, and building inspectors are using FaceTime to do inspections when they can't safely go into residences. Next slide. So like some of the other presenters talked about, our real experience prior to the pandemic was using some of the tools like web pages, Facebook, Twitter to put information outward, but we also were using tools like with Wikimap, Maps, and SurveyMonkey to gather information for projects. Next slide. So one of the first things that we really got faced with after Executive Order 107 was issued was how do we deal with bid openings? Some of the projects that were already out to bid, we needed to figure out a new way to get bids received in the clerk's office and how to open those bids. So many of the municipalities sent out information to their bidders list with the requirements for protective equipment, social distancing, and gathering limitations. Clerks have adapted by utilizing video conferencing and or opening bids outside. Bid review by contractors has not been allowed. Rather, what happens is the clerks will scan the bid documents, and then the bidders can get a copy of the packages to see the unit prices. For new projects that are going out to bid, municipalities and their consultants are looking to digital solutions for distributing documents. Typically, bid distribution has been in person or off of the municipal websites, and now people are looking to outside agencies to assist with it. And I'm happy to say that in all the research I did, I could only find one government agency that has actually canceled their bid openings. So as the commissioner said, it's imperative that we keep moving ahead through this pandemic and providing the services that we need. Next slide. So another item to cross the hurdle on is on the governing body meetings. This was an important step to keep the public informed. With Executive Order 107, you could no longer do in-person meetings. We were fortunate that within days of the order, the Department of Local Government Services provided guidance on remote public meetings that helped guide a lot of what municipalities were doing with their public meetings and their governing body meetings. Many of you have talked about different platforms. There are so many platforms that are available for use for meetings. My municipality uses Zoom. We've actually partnered with Princeton University because they have the webinar package with Zoom, and we just have the standard meeting package. That's worked well for us. Another Mercer County community uses Uber Conference. I've heard that Jersey City uses Microsoft Teams. The webinar format has worked really well for us because it provides us a better way to manage public participation. You have the ability to close caption, add an interpreter with Zoom. Microsoft Teams even has a built-in auto translator. So with all of these applications, one thing to look for is one that allows for the phone-in participation so that you do reach a wider audience, those that maybe aren't as technology savvy as others. So some other tips to share, practice, practice, practice. You know, you never know what glitch might come up as you're preparing for a meeting. You have a lot of volunteers that participate in these meetings that you need to look at their backgrounds, their lighting, the background noise. Just make sure you resolve the audio-visual issues before you actually jump into a public meeting. Also have multiple staff as part of the meeting group so that they can monitor the input and allow people in from the waiting room into the meeting, and they can also see when people are raising hands. So another thing that we've done is we've set up a unique email address for public comments, and we've disabled the chat feature. Our first council meeting, you see a screenshot of our Zoom screen. We did have some Zoom bombing go in. We had about 400 comments that popped up and only 4 were valid. So definitely that is a thing that's out there. Require registration by people that want to participate, have them provide real names and other identifying information. And then also the other feature that we've used is live streaming. So Zoom allows you to seamlessly integrate with YouTube, so we're able to live stream our meetings rather than just having the Zoom option. Next slide. The bigger challenge for municipalities at this point in going virtual is with our planning and zoning board meetings. Municipal land use law is very prescriptive about application and hearing processes for land use applications. It also establishes time clocks for when applications have to be reviewed and go through the public hearing process. While there was some guidance that was released by the Division of Local Government Services after EO 107, it still was fairly ambiguous. It did not provide a clear roadmap for the planning and zoning officials as well as the board attorneys. So many board attorneys and officers are struggling now to figure out how to move forward. We only have one municipality that I've heard of that actually accepts electronic submission of the applications, and that's Hoboken. They've been doing it since 2014. So that leaves you with about 564 other municipalities that are a little bit behind the curve. Like my community, we don't allow for digital submissions. That's something that we would actually have to change in our ordinances to allow for that. So this is being a slower process for municipalities to go digital and virtual with these applications and these meetings. We've always relied on paper. The big phone board displays set up on an easel at the meeting with you know, the 12 packets of information for the board members and the public. So creating the digital files, getting the digital files from the applicants, posting them on websites, redacting information where necessary, because we still have to create a complete digital file. And so that's taking more time for municipalities to figure out how to pass that hurdle. They are still doing meetings, but more of the meetings are starting off with just approval of meeting minutes and, you know, basic administrative items. But they are going into virtual public meetings. I think Jersey City, Madison, some other towns have actually had applications before boards with video conferencing. So we have a lot that we can gain from our other peers learning about that. Next slide. So just to wrap up, I was really excited to find that there was a lot of information within New Jersey that's available to municipalities regarding virtual public involvement and video conferencing. One of the biggest resources I found was actually with Sustainable Jersey. As COVID hit and we were all looking to move to video conferencing, I got a well-timed email blast with an advertisement for a webinar on running effective virtual meetings. As I looked more into their website, I found that they had a spreadsheet catalog of public engagement tools. I see that was one of the chat questions about the various platforms. So go on to their website, check out that catalog. It's quite extensive. And they keep it up to date. There's also free technical assistance in virtual public involvement that municipalities can request. People can also volunteer to be the trainer and the assistance in that through Sustainable Jersey's website as well. And if anybody is going for their Sustainable Jersey certification, all of your efforts can be memorialized by earning points that help you with public engagement and involvement options. There's also the League of Municipalities also has an extensive resource more directed to COVID and other resources for municipalities to get through the pandemic. And then professional societies like the ICMA, the ELGL, New Jersey Society of Municipal Engineers. Many of these professional organizations have resources that are available. They have chat platforms. You just have to reach out, and then you can also participate in sharing your experiences as well as gaining feedback from your peers. Next slide. Thank you very much. I'll be here to answer any questions from the municipal perspective.
Okay. Thank you very much, Deanna. Okay, so up next, our final presenter, they will be presenting from New Jersey STIC's industry sector. We have Orla Peeve and Andy Thomas from ACOM, and they will be doing a live demonstration of a tool. So I'm going to go ahead and provide control to Andy Thomas. Let me find his
Thanks, Amanda. While you're passing control over to him, thanks for inviting us. Very happy to be here. When we launched this in the U.S. a few weeks ago, Bill McGarrigle saw it very quickly on social media when we posted it and reached out to ask us for more information. So appreciate the invite. We do have our first version of this in the U.S. will be launched in the next week or so, and that's for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for the Fort Benning Environmental Impact Statement. So I'm going to hand it over to Andy, who hopefully has the demo pulled up.
Yeah, I am sharing my screen now, so hopefully in a few minutes or a few seconds, hopefully it should be appearing.
I can see it, Andy. Over to you. Thanks.
Okay, great. Many thanks, Orla. Yeah, so hopefully you can all see my screen, and as I'm spinning around the room, this is our online virtual consultation platform. And to give you a really brief history about this platform, we started developing this back in October, November last year, pre-coronavirus, and it was myself and our stakeholder engagement team were discussing what can we do to reach those hard to reach wider demographics that we weren't reaching, certainly in the UK, but I think probably as a global issue too. So when we're putting on live face-to-face events, we were really only capturing, you know, an older generation that were turning up, and we certainly weren't capturing the younger crowd or people who, you know, didn't want to come to events, who, you know, had work issues or childcare issues, or, you know, didn't have the time, or maybe had mental health issues or disabilities, anything that precluded them from coming to or wanting to come to a physical event. How could we produce something digital that was online 24/7 that gave the very similar experience to a public face-to-face? So this is what kind of spawned this idea of the virtual consultation. And as you can see in the room, it's a completely 360 environment, and it's purposely been designed to look very user-friendly and easy to understand. You know, hopefully it'll look very similar to kind of a face-to-face function that you would have in a town hall. And there's multiple things within the room, and I'll say right from the outset, everything is customizable. We built this and coded it ourselves, so everything from the look of the room itself, the layout, everything is completely customizable to whatever, you know, the client would need. So to start, you can have like a little welcome message, and anytime you see one of these little audio buttons, which you'll see on the boards, it effectively can read the board to you. So anybody with you know, partial sight can actually listen to the audio of the board rather than looking at it. You can have a welcome message, email contacts and disclaimers. You've got things like your banners that you can click on, and you can simply zoom in and out of these and look at the granular detail of each board. And you can let the user kind of explore the room at their own leisure, or you can, you know, you can go to one board and navigate them through in a more of a chronological order, so they can be directed around the information how you want them to. There's things like tables that we can utilize here for things like CAD drawing, GIS layers, or 3D model data. You can have project galleries here, which can be CGIs or images, all in a nice user-friendly experience. I mentioned here as well that this works on any platform. I can't remember who it was, but someone mentioned earlier that it's very important that this works on mobile devices, and that was one of our key drivers. So this site is fully optimized for iOS, Android, laptops, desktops, phones, tablets. It works on everything and is super streamlined to load really, really quickly as well for people with low bandwidth internet. In the middle here, we've got a space for video, and if I click on this, this essentially takes us through to ACOM's corporate YouTube channel and the advert we had created a little while back. But this can be used for anything, any media, any video content. It can be YouTube videos, it can be Vimeo, it can be live hosted Zoom or Teams meetings. It could be a welcome message from one of the project team, you know, saying welcome to the consultation, have a look around, you know, data to your left is banners in front of your drawings. And we saw this as a great place for, you know, fly through videos. People were talking earlier about, you know, the use of visualizations in virtual reality. So this is a great place where to put that. Around the back of the room, we've got some of more kind of specialist services that we see a lot, certainly in the UK consultations. We've got some of our virtual reality, excuse me. So this is effectively, you can navigate around a before and after CGI scene using your mouse or your phone, or if you do have access to a headset, then you can look at it in stereoscopic 3D with ease. And next to this, we have our sound demonstrations, or oralization as we call it. So with VR, you get to see the before and after of the impact of a scheme. And with oralization, you get to hear that impact as well if you've got a set of headphones at home. And then finally over here, we've got the ability to download everything as PDFs. So for people who, you know, might not have internet access all the time, they can simply download everything as a report as PDFs, and they can view it offline on any device. And then they can use that for any translation tools or e-readers as well. We've got the ability to link to other platforms. So currently this takes us out of our site into our digital environmental impact assessment platform. But this could be, you know, your websites, clients' websites, planning portals, SurveyMonkey, Google Forms, anything really can be linked into this site and housed within this one room, which contains all of this information. And then finally, it's how do we interact with the user, with the, you know, the stakeholders or the public. So we've got links to feedback forms or surveys, and this is where you can capture any data that you would like to. And as previously mentioned on other sites, this uses Google Analytics on the back end. So as long as all the data that you want to capture when you're asking people, you can also capture the amount of traffic to the site, peak hours, amount of unique visitors, the average time they've spent on the site, how they've been directed to the site, whether it's through social media, you know, Facebook, LinkedIn, or via council's websites or any other means. and it will give you an approximate location as well. And then we would utilize things like surveys or feedback to get, specific, zip code, postal codes, age, demographics, whatever information you want, you can then ask, and all of that would be bundled into our analytics package that we would supply our clients. And then last but not least, we've got ability to live chat. So this is a little widget built into the site, and effectively, you can be browsing a banner and you want to have some information about this image. You can basically start a live chat with anybody on the back end and speak to them live one-to-one in a text-based chat. And we would see this available, say between set hours between 10 and 2 p.m. every day. And when someone wasn't available, that live chat button simply gets replaced with a leave your message function, and people can still respond, and it will then go to an email response form. So yeah, multiple ways to kind of converse with a public and stakeholder, which we think is really key. It won't replace that face-to-face, but we certainly see this as a really good supplementary. And in this time with COVID-19, it is actually replacing a lot of face-to-face meetings globally for us here at ACOM. We're having some really good feedback. We're getting some great stats, demographics that are being hit that weren't currently through face-to-face meetings. And yeah, it's very customizable, works on any device, and hopefully is very user-friendly. So I appreciate that was a very, very quick overview of what we're doing here, but I appreciate there's only a few minutes left for Q&A. So at that point, I will hand over back to you guys.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andy. And so that concludes our presenters. So I'm going to turn it over to Helene Roberts. Helene, are you ready to start the Q&A session?
I am. Can you guys hear me? Just shake those I can see. Yes, you can. Okay.
I'm going to, Helene, before you get started, I'm going to unmute the presenters so that, whoever is available to answer questions can speak. So go ahead.
That is really nice, Amanda. Thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome.
We are going to start at the beginning with Jill and Lana with our FHWA presentation. There was a question: what is an example of an all-in-one tool and what product? Somebody answered it in the chat pod and said, I second that question. It looks like MetroQuest. I'm wondering about other providers too. Jill and Lana, can you address that? Are they unmuted, Amanda?
I'm looking at I'm scrolling through everyone's name just to make sure.
Sorry, did I have Lana on? Because I didn't.
All right, Lana is now unmuted.
Hi, Lana's unmuted, yeah.
So while you're getting Jill unmuted, I can sort of take first stab at that. First of all, I think I saw that somebody responded in the chat pod that Federal Highways doesn't endorse any particular platform, and that is true. We don't. However, I think venues like this, where different transportation agencies and organizations have the opportunity to share their experiences about different tools that they're using, are really invaluable. One thing that we are, as a VPI initiative, planning to share in the near future is a webinar by Iowa DOT. They've contracted with a consultant to build a tool they call the Public Involvement Management Application, PIMA, that they've been using, and they're making that tool available, at least the code available for free to other state DOTs if they agree to share back any sort of enhancements, improvements that they develop. And so the PIMA tool is one such example that a state DOT is using, where the public is able to engage and get information about a project and also watch videos and so on. There's a mapping component where people can see where the project is located, and members of the public are also able to submit their comments directly into that tool. And the tool actually maps where, if a person provides their address and so on, it provides, the tool will map the comments to a location and also sort of color code them and indicate whether the comment is neutral or in favor or opposed to the project. And so it's really kind of cool. We should hope to have that webinar out in the coming months.
Thanks, Lana. Also for Jill and Lana, our designers and LPAs, our local public agencies, are required to hold public meetings in order to satisfy NEPA requirements. Are there any minimum virtual techniques FHWA is endorsing to satisfy these NEPA requirements?
So
I wanted to, oh, go ahead, Jill.
go ahead, Lana. This is environment, so this is like this is right up your alley.
I just wanted to remind folks that Federal Highways does have a coronavirus page where we've sort of listed some information and resources and our current guidance related to virtual public involvement for both the planning process for MPOs as well as for the NEPA process. And currently, FRA, FTA, and Federal Highways are still we're aware of the issues and the questions surrounding VPI and NEPA, and we're reviewing the public hearing requirements under our statutes and under the regulations as well. And so at this point in time, we, in response to the question, we don't have something that we would consider to be minimum requirements for VPI in terms of NEPA. What I would highly recommend is that if you have a project where that's a requirement and you have a plan for moving forward, or you have questions, to coordinate with Federal Highways Office of Project Development and Environmental Review through your Federal Highway Administration Division office, so that we can have some conversations. Because as we saw in a lot of the presentations today, really it often comes down to it depends and what your current project situation is. And so that would allow us to have a conversation about your particular situation and what may be the best approach.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, we're certainly running out of time here. I'm going to pop in one more question, and I'm going to say to everybody that we're going to attempt to address the questions, the Q&A after the meeting. So anything we didn't address, hopefully we can get back to the STIC and the others with the answers. The next one is, it came under the DVRPC presentation, Barry and Allison. Are you seeing diversity in the attendance of your virtual meetings? Is there any concern that those who are not tech savvy or those who do not have access to technology are not participating, or are you able to provide accommodations? And I think we heard from some of the other MPOs and the other agencies about how they were accommodating this concern, but I don't know if you have anything else to add, Barry or Allison.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, everyone touched on this, that if someone is not able to log on to a video call or doesn't have a smartphone, it's definitely a limiting factor. Anyone with a landline can at least call and listen in. It's hard to tell, sort of the question, are we getting a diverse participation? It's hard to tell because you can't necessarily see everybody that's online. But I can say we've had more participation at our some of these virtual meetings than we've had before. And I think in some ways the virtual meeting, as Allison noted, does enable more people to participate. There are plenty of people that can't make it to a meeting or are not comfortable coming to a meeting, or the timing is bad. There's lots of reasons why in-person meetings are a limiting factor as well. So it's a mixed bag. You're definitely, the digital divide is real, and people that don't have technology are not able to access. But in some ways, maybe we've opened up doors for more people to participate.
Yeah, and I would add that so we're doing long range plan outreach online, and we're asking a demographic survey as well, so that we can see who we're reaching, and we're specifically positing it that way. Like, please answer this demographic survey so that we know that how our public outreach efforts are reaching folks, or where we're going. And we're doing extra outreach to organizations that serve more diverse or harder to reach or underrepresented groups. And we were going to do that anyway with in-person. So now it's transitioning it to online for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Barry and Allison, Amanda, I think we're going to have to call it and promise these people that we'll address their questions and get back to them with the answers.
Okay.
It's up to you, but we're going to start, yeah.
I mean, it's definitely
losing people quickly.
It's 3 minutes after our scheduled ending time. Do you want to do just maybe one more question and then we'll call it a wrap? And then, like Helene said, any questions that did not get answered, she's typing them into a Word document. We will get the subject matter experts to answer the questions, and then we will make sure that we email the document out to everybody who participated.
Yeah.
And also the meeting, the meeting was recorded as well, so we will post the recording online as well. Go ahead, Helene.
During the SJTPO presentation, there was a lot of discussion about the local school districts and the fact that they're providing their children with devices and sometimes internet access. So the question was, have you touched base? This is for Jennifer and Alan. Have you touched base with any of your school districts? For example, Ewing Township gave out tablets to students and instructions to get free internet that at least one of the service providers is offering now. Then there was an extensive discussion about other school districts that are doing the same with devices and internet access. Did you guys consider doing anything like that, or did you do that, Jennifer and Alan?
This is Alan. I can say that we have definitely not reached out to the 70 or so districts just in our region to find out about that. It's definitely an interesting thought. Reaching out to them could be a challenge, especially now. But yeah, that is an interesting thought that some additional access might be out there. I know my wife is a teacher in a low-income district, and they did provide computers. They did not provide any kind of internet access, and the computers are very restricted in what you can do on them. So, you know, that's going to vary from district to district. But
thank you. And then for ACOM, Andy, I think Orla had to leave, but for Andy, we're a little bit curious about the cost. I know I asked Orla this before. The software is pretty comprehensive. And then one more for you, Andy. Is there a way to make sure people are definitely seeing one board and definitely taking the exit survey? I don't know if you can make them do that, but
yeah, you can. The best way we've had it done is just to kind of like number the stations to kind of guide people around. And in terms of like, you know, if you definitely want to capture people's feedback, you can kind of make it a pop-up that appears before they exit the site, and you just ask, you know, please will you fill in the survey? You know, it helps us for data gathering, that kind of stuff. So yeah, you can kind of pop things up more in people's faces if you want, or do it in subtle ways. And in terms of ballpark costs, you know, it's difficult to kind of say for every project, but a decent ballpark figure would be about 10,000 US for a virtual room, give or take.
Excellent, thank you. And that's the same answer that Orla gave earlier. So you guys are
there we go.
You're in sync. All right, I think we do need to call it. There were a lot of general questions. Some of which were sort of addressed in the chat pod a little bit with some information, and some of which were not. But I think we probably need to call it before we get into the general questions.
Okay. So I guess that's it for everybody. Mike, I don't know if you wanted to jump on real quick and say anything, or if Diane wanted to say anything. Go ahead, Mike.
I would just like to say a few words. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yeah, I can hear you.
You know, you, Helene, and your team have definitely outdone yourself with this session. This was fantastic. The commissioner had to jump off at 12 o'clock to take a call with the Turnpike, but she shot me a text, and she asked me to extend her thanks to the team, to extend her thanks to the presenters, and she made a point to, you know, mention how impressed she was with the number of takeaways there was from these sessions. So on behalf of the commissioner, I'd like to thank everyone. You know, this was a very, I think, informative and productive session. And good idea about recording it, because I think a lot of folks will be able to reference this and really benefit from this event. Thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, I would like to thank everybody for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Amanda, thank you very much for putting this together.
Oh, you're welcome.
Stay safe, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.